The scandal broke on a Tuesday morning in late March, precisely 4 months and 11 days into an arrangement that was never supposed to feel like anything at all. Iris Thornwell stood in the sun-drenched breakfast room of Greymont House, holding a letter she had not been meant to see. Her hands did not shake. Years of necessity had trained steadiness into her bones, but the words blurred nonetheless. Behind her, the door clicked open with the particular weight that announced the Duke of Greymont himself. "You're up early," Julian Carver said, his voice carrying that morning roughness she had learned to recognize over breakfasts they shared in careful silence. "I thought you'd still be—" He stopped. She knew why. She had turned to face him, and the letter was visible in her hand, its wax seal broken, its secrets exposed. "It's from your solicitor," Iris said. Her voice came out steady, which felt like its own small rebellion against the heat climbing her throat. "It arrived in yesterday's post, mixed with mine, apparently." Julian's expression shuttered in the way it always did when confronted with something that required feeling rather than strategy. He was handsome in the morning light. She had stopped pretending she didn't notice, but just now his beauty felt like armor. "Iris, Clause 17, she continued, as if he hadn't spoken. "The one about expedited annulment procedures. I hadn't realized you'd asked Mr. Pemberton to begin drafting the documents already. We still have 3 months remaining." The silence that followed tasted like copper. Outside, London was waking. Carriages rattling past, servants calling to one another in distant hallways, but the breakfast room existed in its own terrible stillness. "You weren't supposed to see that," Julian said finally. Iris laughed, a sound without humor. "No, I suppose I wasn't supposed to see a great many things." It had started, as most disasters did, with desperation dressed as practicality. 7 months earlier, Iris had stood in a solicitor's office in Cheapside, her last decent dress pressed to stiffness, her pride the only thing holding her upright. Her father's debts had been a noose tightening for years. His death 3 months prior had simply jerked it closed. The house was forfeit. Her younger sister's dowry was gone. The dressmaker's shop where Iris worked had closed without warning, and landlords did not accept promises in place of rent. She had expected refusal when she requested an audience with the Duke of Greymont. She had not expected him to agree. "You need money," he had said in that first meeting, seated across from her in a study so vast it echoed. "I need a wife. For 7 months." Iris had stared at him. Julian Carver was known throughout London as a man of rigid principle, cool logic, and absolutely no romantic inclinations. At 33, he had avoided marriage with the single-mindedness of a man fleeing plague. "I don't understand." "My uncle died 2 months ago," Julian had explained, with the careful precision of a man describing a business contract. "He left his entire unentailed estate, including Thornfield Manor and its lands, to me, on one condition: that I be married within the year and remain so for no less than 7 months. A safeguard against hasty decisions," he claimed. The will specified marriage, Mrs. Thornwell. It did not specify love. The title had made her flinch. Widow's weeds at 26 felt like wearing someone else's life. Her marriage to Thomas Thornwell had lasted 11 months before fever took him, brief enough that she still sometimes forgot to answer to Mrs. "Why me?" she had asked. Something had shifted in Julian's expression then, the first crack in the perfect facade. "Because you need this arrangement as much as I do, because you won't expect anything beyond the terms, and because—" He had hesitated, then continued with brutal honesty. "Because you will leave when the 7 months are complete. No negotiations, no attempts to extend what was never meant to last." She should have heard the warning in those words. Instead, she had heard salvation. The contract had been drawn up within days, £1,000 upon signing, residence at Greymont House in Mayfair for the duration, an additional £4,000 upon successful completion of the 7 months, with annulment papers filed immediately thereafter. Her sister Violet would be provided a modest dowry, all debts cleared. In exchange, Iris would play the part of the Duchess of Greymont in all public settings. She would attend the necessary social functions, maintain the household, and provide the appearance of a legitimate union. What happened in private was immaterial, the contract specified. Separate bedchambers, separate lives, really. that happened to intersect at breakfast and the occasional ball. It was, Julian had assured her, perfectly straightforward. He had been wrong. Now standing in the breakfast room with evidence of his eagerness to end their arrangement, clutched in her hand, Iris felt the full weight of her own stupidity. She had broken the only rule that mattered. She had let it become real. "I should have knocked," Julian said, and the stiffness in his voice carved something open in her chest. "When I entered, this is your breakfast room as much as mine." For 3 more months, Iris set the letter down on the small writing desk by the window, carefully, as if it might shatter, after which point it will be neither of ours. "Iris, don't." The word came out sharper than she intended. She softened it with effort. "Please don't. I'm not angry, Your Grace. This was always the agreement. Your Grace." She hadn't called him that in weeks. The return to formality sat between them like a wall going up brick by brick. Julian crossed the room, stopping a careful 3 feet away, close enough to be heard, far enough to maintain the distance the contract required. "I asked Pemberton to draw up the papers because the process takes time. I wanted everything in place so that when the 7 months concluded you could leave immediately." "As you wished." "Of course," Iris said, and fought to keep her voice level. "As we both wished." "Yes," Julian agreed, but something in the way he said it felt like a question. The door opened again, and Mrs. Kendall, the housekeeper, appeared with her usual impeccable timing. "Your Grace, Lady Vivian Lockhart has arrived for tea. She insists it cannot wait." Julian's jaw tightened. "Tell her I am engaged." "She suggested you might say that, Your Grace. She also suggested that you would wish to reconsider, given the matter concerns your wife." The possessive sent an unwelcome thrill through Iris's chest. She crushed it. "I'll go," she said. "Lady Vivian and I can speak privately." "No." Julian's tone carried the weight of absolute authority. "If she has business with you, she has business with both of us." 5 minutes later, they sat in the drawing room, presenting the united front they had perfected over 4 months of practice. Julian in his chair by the fire, one ankle crossed over his knee in studied casualness. Iris on the sofa, her hands folded in her lap, her spine straight. The picture of aristocratic matrimony. Lady Vivian Lockhart swept in like an approaching storm, all cold beauty and calculated grace. She had been angling for the position of Duchess of Greymont for years, everyone knew it, and Julian's sudden marriage to an unknown widow had been a very public slap. "Your Grace," she said to Julian, her curtsy shallow enough to border on insult. Then, to Iris, "Mrs. Thornwell." The use of her maiden name landed like a challenge. "Lady Vivian," Julian said coolly. Mrs. Kendall mentioned urgency. "Indeed." Vivian settled onto a chair without being invited, her movements languid. "I thought it only charitable to warn you that certain questions are being raised about the rather sudden nature of your marriage, the lack of courtship, the complete absence of the new Duchess at any meaningful events prior to your wedding." Iris felt Julian go still beside her. "We are private people," Julian said. "I fail to see how that concerns you." But it concerns everyone when the Duke of Greymont marries in what appears to be unseemly haste." Vivian smiled, and it was not kind. Particularly when the bride is a widow of such limited background. One begins to wonder about motivations, about inheritances that require marriage, about arrangements. The last word hung in the air like poison. "You are suggesting?" Julian's voice had gone dangerously soft. "I am suggesting nothing, Your Grace. I am merely observing what others have begun to notice, that your Duchess seems remarkably comfortable with the idea of temporary residence, that she has made no changes to the household, that she wears no family jewels." Vivian's gaze flicked to Iris's bare throat. "That she carries herself less like a woman in love and more like a woman playing a part." Iris's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her face serene through years of practice at hiding desperation. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "I am simply a woman who recognizes that love and flash are not the same thing." "Charming," Vivian murmured. "One wonders what the matrons of Almack's will think. Whether they will remain so charmed when they learn that the Duke of Greymont's marriage is little more than, what did I hear? A 7-month audition for a fortune." Julian rose in one fluid movement, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "You will leave my house," he said, each word carved from ice. "You will not speak of my wife again. You will not spread gossip or innuendo. If you do, I will ensure that every door in London closes to you. I have that power, Lady Vivienne. Do not test whether I have the will." For a moment fear flickered across Vivienne's face. Then her smile sharpened. "Of course, Your Grace. I meant no offense. I simply thought you should know what is being whispered." She stood, smoothed her skirts. "Do send my regards to your uncle's solicitor. I hear he's been quite busy lately." She left with the satisfaction of someone who had already drawn blood. When the door closed, Julian turned to Iris. "She knows. Or suspects." Iris stood, needing movement, needing air. "We knew this was a risk, someone noticing, someone questioning. If she can prove the marriage is a sham, if she can demonstrate it was entered solely for inheritance, the will can be contested." Julian's hands curled into fists at his sides. "Everything will be forfeit. The estate, the funds, your sister's dowry." "My sister." Iris pressed a hand to her stomach, fighting nausea. "Oh God, if this falls apart, Violet has nothing. She'll end up exactly where I was. It won't fall apart." Julian crossed to her, close enough now that she could see the storm in his grey eyes. "I won't allow it. You can't simply decree. Watch me." His jaw set with that particular stubbornness she had learned meant immovable resolve. "Vivienne suspects. She does not know. And even if she did, a contracted marriage is not illegal, merely unusual. What we need is to remove all doubt, to present a united front so convincing that suspicion becomes impossible." Iris looked at him, this man who had been a stranger 4 months ago, whose morning coffee preferences she now knew by heart, whose rare smiles had become the high point of her carefully measured days. "How? We attend every event, every ball, every dinner, every tedious garden party. We are seen together, constantly. We are affectionate in public. He hesitated. "We behave as though this arrangement has become something more." The irony tasted like ash. "We pretend to be in love." "Yes. For 3 more months." "Yes. And then?" Julian's expression shuttered again, that careful blankness descending. "And then the 7 months conclude. As agreed. The annulment proceeds. You receive your funds and your freedom." Freedom. The word should have sounded like relief. Instead, it sounded like an ending. "All right," Iris said, because what else could she say? Her sister's future hung in the balance. Her own survival depended on seeing this through. "We play the part." "We play the part," Julian echoed. Neither of them acknowledged the possibility that for at least one of them, it might no longer be pretending at all. The first test came 3 days later, at the Ashworth ball. Iris stood at the top of the grand staircase, her hand resting lightly on Julian's arm, and fought the urge to flee. The ballroom below glittered with 1,000 candles, and every eye had turned to watch their entrance. "Breathe," Julian murmured, low enough that only she could hear. "You look magnificent." She did, actually. The gown was sapphire silk cut to perfection, with the Greymont diamonds at her throat. Julian's first action after Vivienne's visit had been to retrieve the family jewels from their vault and insist Iris wear them. The stones were cold against her skin, beautiful and heavy as a claim. "This was easier when no one was paying attention," she whispered back. "Then let's give them something worth watching." He led her down the stairs with the easy confidence of a man born to command attention, and Iris followed, because she had no choice. Because her sister's dowry depended on this performance, because somewhere in the past 4 months she had become catastrophically good at pretending this was real. The receiving line was an exercise in endurance. Smile, curtsy. Accept congratulations on her marriage with Grace. Ignore the calculating looks from the women who had once angled for Julian's attention. Pretend she didn't notice Vivienne Lockhart watching from across the room with a cat's patience. "You're doing well," Julian said, as they finally escaped into the crowd. "I feel like a fraud." "You are a duchess, that is not fraud, it is fact." For 3 more months. The reminder felt necessary, a tether to reality. Something flickered in Julian's expression, too quick to name. "Yes," he said. 3 more months. The first waltz began, and Julian led her onto the floor with the easy grace of a man who had been taught to dance before he could read. Iris had learned in a different world, governess-taught, practical, sufficient for country assemblies, but never meant for grand ballrooms. Her hand trembled slightly as she placed it on his shoulder. "I've got you," Julian said quietly, and then they were moving. He was a beautiful dancer, all controlled power and perfect timing. He guided her through the steps, as though they had done this 1,000 times, his hand firm at her waist, his focus absolute. Other couples swirled around them, but Iris was aware only of Julian, the warmth of his hand through the silk of her glove, the way he smelled of sandalwood and something uniquely him, the intensity in his eyes as he looked at her. "Everyone is watching us," she breathed. "Good." His fingers tightened fractionally at her waist. "Let them watch. This is just for show," she reminded herself. Of course. But his gaze held hers, and for a moment, the ballroom disappeared. Just for show. The dance ended too soon, and not soon enough. As they left the floor, Lord Ashworth himself approached, all jovial good humour and calculating eyes. "Greymont, splendid to see you here, and with your lovely bride, no less." He bowed to Iris with exaggerated courtesy. "We've all been quite curious about the new Duchess, you understand. Such a whirlwind courtship. When one meets one's perfect match," Julian said smoothly, "delay seems pointless." "Quite so. Quite so." Ashworth's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Though one does wonder why we never heard of Mrs. Thornwell before the wedding. You were most skilled at keeping her hidden, Your Grace." "I was not hidden," Iris said, her voice carrying just enough edge. "I was in mourning. My late husband died less than a year before the Duke and I met. I had no interest in society." "Ah, yes, the late Mr. Thornwell. Tragic, of course. And what did your husband do, my dear?" The question was a trap, delicately laid. Thomas Thornwell had been a clerk, respectable, but hardly aristocratic. His death had left debts, not fortunes. "He was a man of principle and intelligence," Iris said quietly. "He valued character over rank. As do I." "How admirable." Ashworth's tone suggested he found it anything but. "One hopes those values serve you well in your new position. The duties of a duchess are quite extensive." Julian's hand moved to the small of Iris's back, a gesture of subtle possession that sent heat through her spine. "My wife is more than equal to any challenge," he said, and the steel in his voice made Ashworth step back. "If you'll excuse us, Lord Ashworth, I believe the supper dance is beginning." As they walked away, Iris fought to keep her breathing steady. "He was testing me. He was being an ass." Julian's jaw was tight. "Half the lords in this room are desperate to see us fail, either because they wanted the Thornfield estate for themselves or because they take offence at my marrying outside their narrow circle. I am outside their narrow circle. You are exactly where you belong." He stopped, turned to face her fully, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "Don't doubt that, Iris. Not for a moment." The way he said her name, like a promise, like a prayer, undid something careful inside her chest. "Julian," she started, but the music began, and he swept her back onto the floor. This time the dance felt different, more intimate. His hand splayed wider at her waist, drawing her marginally closer than propriety strictly allowed. Her pulse hammered in her throat, where the diamonds lay cold, and his gaze lingered warm. "They're watching us again," she murmured. "I know." His thumb traced a small circle against her back, barely perceptible through the layers of silk and corset. "Does it bother you?" "No." The honesty escaped before she could catch it. "It should. But it doesn't." Something shifted in his eyes, hunger, maybe, or recognition. "Iris, don't." She looked away, breaking the intensity of his gaze. "Please don't say whatever you're about to say." "Why not?" "Because we have 3 more months of pretending ahead of us, and if you say something real, I don't know how I'll survive them." The music ended. Julian's hands stayed where they were for one breath too long before he stepped back, and the loss felt like winter. "Of course," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Forgive me." But as they returned to the edge of the ballroom, Iris caught sight of Vivian Lockhart in conversation with Lady Ashworth, both women watching the Duke and Duchess with expressions of cold speculation. The game had only just begun, and Iris was already losing. The summons came a week later, delivered on cream stationery with a wax seal Iris didn't recognize. Lady Thornbury requests the pleasure of your company for tea on Thursday afternoon. The invitation was addressed to Iris alone, pointed, deliberate, impossible to refuse. Julian read the note over breakfast, his expression darkening. This is Vivian's doing. Lady Thornbury is her aunt. Iris set down her coffee with deliberate care. The most influential matron in London. If she decides I'm not suitable to be a duchess, then her opinion is irrelevant. But Julian's fingers drummed against the table, a rare tell of agitation. Iris, Lady Thornbury is known for destroying reputations over tea. She will ask invasive questions, make impossible demands, test you in ways designed to make you fail. Then I won't fail. Iris met his gaze steadily. We need her approval, or Vivian will use her influence to destroy us. I can handle an afternoon of uncomfortable questions. I don't like sending you into that alone. The concern in his voice made her chest ache. I won't be alone. I'll be armed with the knowledge that I have every right to be your wife, for 7 months at least. The reminder hung between them like a blade. Thursday arrived too soon. Iris dressed with care, choosing a morning gown of soft grey, modest, elegant, impossible to criticize. She twisted her hair into a simple chignon and fastened a small cameo at her throat. The Greymont diamonds stayed locked away. Lady Thornbury would be looking for ostentation, for signs of social climbing. Iris intended to give her nothing. Julian caught her in the hallway before she left. If she becomes cruel, if she oversteps, send for me. I won't need to. Humor me. He adjusted the cameo at her throat with gentle fingers, the gesture absurdly intimate. Please. Iris nodded, not trusting her voice. Lady Thornbury's townhouse was a monument to old money and older prejudices. Iris was shown into a drawing room, where every surface gleamed with polish and the air smelled of rosewater and judgment. Lady Thornbury herself sat enthroned in a high-backed chair, all sharp eyes and sharper tongue. Mrs. Thornwell, she said, deliberately using Iris's old name, how kind of you to accept my invitation. It is an honor, Lady Thornbury. Iris took the offered seat, spine straight, hands folded. I'm sure. Lady Thornbury poured tea with exaggerated precision. I must confess I was quite surprised to learn of Greymont's marriage. He's been so very particular about avoiding matrimony. One wonders what prompted such a sudden change. When one meets the right person, Iris said carefully, timing becomes irrelevant. Charming, though it does seem remarkably convenient, does it not? His uncle's will requiring marriage, your own difficult financial circumstances. She smiled, cold as January. Some might call it suspiciously convenient. Iris sipped her tea, buying time. I cannot control what people choose to believe, Lady Thornbury. I can only live according to my own conscience. And does your conscience trouble you at all? Marrying a duke while still wearing your mourning in spirit, if not in dress? The blow landed precisely where intended. Iris set down her teacup with a soft click. My late husband has been gone nearly 2 years. He would have wanted me to live, Lady Thornbury, not to bury myself in grief. How conveniently flexible grief can be. Lady Thornbury leaned forward, predator sensing weakness. Tell me, what did you do before your marriage to Greymont, after your first husband died? I worked in a dressmaker's shop. Gasps from the other ladies present. Iris hadn't realized they had an audience until that moment. 4 other women sat arranged around the room like jurors. A shop girl, Lady Thornbury's voice dripped disdain. How industrious. And now you expect society to accept you as a duchess. I expect nothing, Iris said quietly. I simply am a duchess. The title was given by marriage, not by expectation. Pretty words, but words don't make you suitable for the position. Breeding does. Family does. You have neither. The old shame tried to rise. The weight of her father's failures, her own desperate scramble for survival, the knowledge that she would never truly belong in these gilded rooms. But beneath the shame, something else stirred, something harder. You're right, Iris said, and watched Lady Thornbury's eyes widen in surprise. I have no breeding, no family name worth mentioning, no fortune of my own. What I have is this. I have survived poverty, widowhood, and desperation without compromising my integrity. I have worked with my hands and known hunger. I understand what most people in this room will never understand. That position is temporary, but character endures. She stood, setting aside her tea. The Duke of Greymont chose me, Lady Thornbury, not for my connections or my bloodline, but for who I am. If that is not enough for you, then I suggest you take up your concerns with him directly. How dare you? I dare because I am the Duchess of Greymont. The title settled around her shoulders like armor, and I have nothing to prove to you. She walked out with her head high, aware of the stunned silence behind her, aware that she had just made everything infinitely worse, aware that Julian would hear of this within hours. She was right. He was waiting when her carriage returned to Greymont House, his expression thunderous. What happened? Iris stripped off her gloves, her hands finally shaking now that the performance was over. I may have told Lady Thornbury that her opinion was irrelevant. You... Julian stared at her. Then incredibly he laughed. Good God, you actually told her that? More or less. Iris sank onto a chair, suddenly exhausted. I'm sorry. I know we need her approval. But she was so cruel and I couldn't... Stop apologizing. Julian knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. The position put them eye to eye, intimate and startling. You were brilliant. I was reckless. You were honest. His thumbs rubbed circles over her knuckles. And honesty is something London society sees far too rarely. She'll destroy us now. Tell everyone I'm unsuitable, that the marriage is a sham. Let her try. Julian's voice carried absolute conviction. I will defend you, Iris, against Vivian, against Lady Thornbury, against anyone who questions your right to be my wife. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning neither of them could afford to examine. For 3 more months, Iris whispered. Julian's hands tightened on hers. Yes, he said finally. 3 more months. But when he stood and walked away, Iris could have sworn she heard doubt in his voice. The consequences arrived faster than expected. 2 days after the disastrous tea, Iris received a letter from her sister. Violet's handwriting was rushed, the words barely legible. Iris. The modiste has withdrawn her services. She says she cannot in good conscience provide my wedding trousseau when questions have been raised about your position. Mr. Hartley's mother has suggested we delay the wedding until the matter of your marriage is resolved. She fears association with scandal. I don't understand what's happening. Please tell me everything will be all right. Iris read the letter 3 times, each pass making her hands shake harder. Violet's wedding was in 6 weeks. The dowry Julian had promised depended on completing the 7 months. If the arrangement fell apart now, her sister would lose everything. No dowry meant no marriage to Mr. Hartley, who was kind and steady, and loved Violet desperately, but whose practical merchant family would never accept a bride with nothing. Iris! Julian appeared in the doorway of the morning room, already dressed for riding. I thought we might... What's wrong? She handed him the letter without speaking. His face hardened as he read, Damn Vivian to hell. This is my fault. Iris pressed her palms to her eyes, fighting tears. If I hadn't antagonized Lady Thornbury, if I had just been meek and agreeable, if you had been meek and agreeable, she would have found another reason to attack you. Julian crossed to her side, his presence solid and steadying. This is deliberate, Iris. Vivian is targeting your sister to hurt you, to make you desperate enough to walk away from our arrangement. It's working. The admission tasted like failure. I can't let Violet suffer for my choices. She won't suffer. Julian pulled her to her feet, his hands gentle on her shoulders. I promise you she won't suffer. We will fix this. How? Lady Thornbury has already poisoned opinion against me. If she's convinced the modiste to withdraw services, others will follow. Violet will be ostracized before her wedding even happens. Then we give them something that makes rejection impossible. Julian's jaw set with determination. We host an event. Here at Greymont House. A ball to introduce you properly to society. We invite everyone, every influential family, every title that matters. We demonstrate that you have my complete support and the full weight of the Greymont name behind you. Iris shook her head. That will take weeks to organize. Violet's wedding is in 6 weeks. We don't have time. We have 3 weeks. He said it with absolute certainty. Mrs. Kendall can manage the household arrangements. I'll handle the invitations personally. We'll make it the event of the season. So important that anyone who refuses to attend will mark themselves as social outcasts. Julian, this is insane. A ball of that magnitude, the expense alone, is irrelevant. He gripped her shoulders more firmly, forcing her to meet his eyes. Listen to me, Iris. I will not allow Vivian or Lady Thornbury or anyone else to hurt you. I will not allow your sister to suffer because of my uncle's impossible will. We entered this arrangement as equals. I promised you funds and security. I intend to deliver both. The conviction in his voice made something crack open in her chest. Why are you doing this? Because it's right. Because you deserve better than the treatment you've received. Because... He stopped, something raw flickering across his face. Because I chose you. That means something. I chose you. The words echoed through her, dangerous as a flame near kindling. All right, she said quietly. We host a ball. Julian's smile was brief but genuine. Good. Now first things first, we need to send a message that cannot be misinterpreted. Get your cloak. Where are we going? To pay a visit to your sister's modiste, together. The dressmaker's shop on Bond Street was elegant and expensive, its windows displaying muslins and silks that cost more than Iris had once earned in a year. When they arrived, the proprietress, Mrs. Dalton, emerged from the back room, her expression carefully neutral. Your Grace. She curtsied to Julian, then, after a pointed pause, to Iris. Your Grace. Mrs. Dalton. Julian's voice carried the weight of ducal authority. I understand you have withdrawn your services from Miss Violet Thornwell. Mrs. Dalton's hands twisted in her apron. Your Grace, I intended no offence, but there have been questions about the Duchess. Lady Thornbury herself suggested it might be unwise to associate with... With my wife? Julian's tone could have frozen the Thames. You find it unwise to associate with the Duchess of Greymont? That is... Allow me to clarify your position, Mrs. Dalton. Julian pulled out a card, wrote something on it, handed it over. That is a letter of introduction to my banker. Present it, and you will find an account opened in your name containing enough funds to secure this shop's prosperity for the next 5 years. On one condition. Mrs. Dalton stared at the card, her face pale. Your Grace? You will provide Miss Violet Thornwell with the finest trousseau you are capable of creating. You will do so with the full knowledge that she is under the protection of the Duke and Duchess of Greymont. You will refuse no service that she or my wife request, and you will make it abundantly clear to anyone who asks that Lady Thornbury's opinions on suitability are worth precisely nothing compared to mine. He leaned forward, his smile dangerous. Do we understand each other? Yes, Your Grace. Mrs. Dalton's hands shook on the card. Perfectly. Excellent. My wife will return later this week to review designs for Miss Thornwell's trousseau. I trust you will be eager to accommodate her. When they left the shop, Iris felt dizzy. That was, you just ensured your sister will have her wedding clothes and made it very clear that you have my complete backing. Julian handed her into the carriage with care. One modiste influenced by Lady Thornbury is one modiste too many. Word will spread. Others will follow Mrs. Dalton's lead or face the prospect of losing the Greymont patronage. You're weaponizing your position. For me, yes. He settled beside her, and the close confines of the carriage made her intensely aware of his presence. I told you, Iris, I will defend you. That wasn't idle talk. She looked at him, really looked at him. At the man who had offered her a contract 7 months ago with cold pragmatism, who had promised nothing beyond money and separation. The man who was now threatening modistes and planning balls, and watching her with an intensity that made her skin feel too tight. This was never supposed to matter, she said quietly. We were supposed to be strangers sharing a house. I know. And now? Julian held her gaze for a long moment. And now I find that separation is easier in theory than in practice. The carriage jolted over a rut in the road, throwing Iris against Julian's shoulder. His arm came around her automatically, steadying her, and for a heartbeat, neither of them moved. She could feel his heart beating through the layers of wool and linen, could feel the warmth of him, the solidness. We still have 3 months, she said, not sure if she was reassuring him or herself. Yes. His arm didn't move. 3 months. But as the carriage carried them through London, Iris felt the first real stirrings of panic. Not because the arrangement was falling apart, because it was becoming something neither of them had agreed to, something real, something that would hurt infinitely more when the 7 months ended and she had to walk away from a man she was beginning to suspect she could love. The ball preparations consumed the next 3 weeks like a fever. Mrs. Kendall orchestrated an army of servants who polished every surface in Greymont House until it gleamed. Florists arrived daily with elaborate arrangements. The kitchens operated at a frenzy, preparing delicacies that required multiple days of preparation. Julian wrote invitations in his own hand to 200 of London's most influential families, each one a personal request from the Duke of Greymont that carried implicit threat: attend or be marked as an enemy. Iris found herself swept into the machinery of it all, making decisions about table settings and menu selections, and which musicians to hire. It was exhausting and terrifying, and occasionally exhilarating, particularly when Julian would appear at her elbow to offer an opinion, or simply to smile at her in a way that made her forget, temporarily, that none of this was permanent. "You're in your element," he said one afternoon, finding her in the ballroom directing footmen on chandelier placement. "I didn't expect that." Iris wiped dust from her hands, suddenly self-conscious. "I used to help organize the assembly balls in my village, before Thomas died, before everything fell apart. I liked it, the logistics, the way all the small decisions accumulated into something beautiful. You should do this more often. Host events, I mean, as Duchess." He paused. "While you still are Duchess." The reminder stung more than it should have. 12 weeks left," she said lightly. "Hardly worth establishing a social calendar." Something shuttered in Julian's expression. "Of course, I simply meant—" He stopped, shook his head. "Never mind what I meant." But the conversation haunted Iris as she returned to preparations. Julian had been different these past weeks, more present, more attentive. He took breakfast with her every morning now, lingering over coffee to discuss the day's plans. He asked her opinion on matters of estate management, truly listened to her answers. Twice he had found her reading in the library late at night, and simply sat with her in companionable silence until she was ready to retire. They were becoming friends, Iris realized with dawning horror. Or something more than friends. Something that felt dangerously like partnership, and in 12 weeks it would end. The night before the ball, Iris couldn't sleep. She paced her room until after midnight, then gave up and slipped downstairs to the library, seeking comfort in books and solitude. She found Julian there instead. He stood by the fire in shirt sleeves and waistcoat, the formal layers of his usual armor stripped away. A glass of brandy sat untouched on the table beside him. He looked younger like this, more vulnerable, and when he turned at her entrance, his expression was unguarded. "Iris, I thought you'd be asleep." "I couldn't." She pulled her dressing gown tighter, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the situation, both of them in nightclothes, alone in firelight. "I kept thinking about tomorrow. What if no one comes? What if Vivienne has poisoned opinion so thoroughly that the invitations are ignored?" "They'll come." Julian crossed to her, stopping just short of proper distance. "I am still the Duke of Greymont. They may despise me for marrying you, but they won't risk my displeasure by refusing my personal invitation." How comforting. They'll attend out of fear rather than respect. "I'll take attendance however I can get it, as long as it protects you." He reached out, hesitated, then tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was unbearably gentle. "You're worried." Terrified. The admission came easier than expected. "What if I fail tomorrow? What if I prove Lady Thornbury right, that I'm not fit to be a duchess? Iris, look at me." Julian cupped her face in his hands, tilting it up until she had no choice but to meet his eyes. "You have survived things that would break most people. You have maintained grace under pressure that would crush lesser souls. You are intelligent, kind, quick-witted, and brave. You are more than fit to be a duchess. You are—" He stopped, something raw flickering across his face. "For you are extraordinary." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning that transcended their arrangement. Iris's breath caught, Julian. I know. His thumbs traced along her cheekbones, the touch feather-light and devastating. I know what we agreed, I know the terms, but these past weeks I've found myself forgetting that this is temporary, forgetting that you'll leave when the 7 months end. I find myself wishing... Don't. Iris pulled back, though it cost her. Don't wish for things we can't have. This was always meant to end. Why? The question came out sharp. Why must it end? The contract said 7 months, yes, but contracts can be renegotiated. Annulments can be cancelled. If both parties are willing... Julian, stop. Iris wrapped her arms around herself, trying to contain the hope threatening to shatter her carefully maintained defences. You're not thinking clearly. Tomorrow is important. Your reputation hangs in the balance. You're worried about the ball, about protecting me, and it's making you say things you don't mean. I mean every word. You don't. She forced herself to meet his eyes, to be cruel, because kindness would destroy them both. You need this marriage to satisfy your uncle's will. You need me to play the part for 12 more weeks, that's all this is. Strategy, obligation. Don't confuse it with something else. And what if I'm not confused? Julian stepped closer, his voice dropping to something raw and desperate. What if I've spent the past 4 months watching you transform my empty house into a home? What if I've found myself looking for excuses to see you, to talk to you, to be near you? What if I wake up thinking of you and fall asleep wishing you were beside me, instead of locked away in your own chamber? Iris's heart hammered so hard, she thought it might crack her ribs. Then you're making a mistake. I'm nobody, Julian, a merchant's widow with no connections and less fortune. You can have anyone. After this arrangement ends, you could court someone appropriate, someone bred for this position. I don't want someone appropriate. His hands fisted at his sides, frustration evident in every line of his body. I want you. The words hit like a physical blow. Iris stumbled back, needing distance, needing air. You can't. We can't. The contract. Damn the contract. Julian followed her retreat, intensity blazing from him. Iris, I'm trying to tell you that this arrangement has become something I never anticipated, that you have become someone I cannot imagine losing, that these 3 months ahead feel less like a promise and more like a threat. Stop. She held up a hand, fighting tears. Just stop. This isn't real, Julian. It's proximity. It's the forced intimacy of our situation. When the 7 months end and we separate, you'll realize that what you're feeling is relief, not loss. You're wrong. I'm not. She backed toward the door, desperate to escape before she shattered completely. And even if you were right, even if this is real, we can't act on it. The moment we do, we change the terms. We make this about emotion instead of agreement, and if Vivienne discovers that, she can use it to prove the marriage was a fraud from the beginning. We'll lose everything. Julian opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. The logic had landed. So we continue as we are, pretending in public, separate in private, for 12 more weeks. And then... Iris reached for the door handle, her hand shaking. And then we honor our agreement. You file for annulment. I take my funds and leave. We become what we agreed to be from the start, strangers who once shared a house. I won't be able to forget you. The quiet certainty in his voice nearly broke her. Then I'm sorry, Iris whispered. But forgetting is the only kindness I can offer. She fled before he could respond, racing back to her room, locking the door behind her. Only then did she allow herself to crumble, sliding down the door, pressing her hands to her mouth to muffle the sobs that tore through her chest. Because Julian was right. Because she had fallen in love with him somewhere between breakfast conversations and library silences. Because she wanted to stay more than she wanted her next breath. And because staying would destroy them both. The contract protected them. It gave them an exit. It ensured that when feelings became too dangerous, they had an escape route already mapped. Without it, they would have to choose. And Iris had learned long ago that wanting something desperately didn't mean you deserved to keep it. She cried herself to exhaustion, then dragged herself to bed and stared at the ceiling until dawn lightened her window. In 12 hours, she would stand beside Julian at their ball and play the part of devoted duchess. She would smile and dance and convince London that their marriage was genuine and unshakable. And then she would spend the remaining weeks counting down to the moment she could finally walk away before her heart broke completely. The ballroom blazed with 1,000 candles. Iris stood at the top of the staircase in a gown of midnight blue that made the Greymont diamonds at her throat look like captured stars. Her hair was arranged in an elaborate style that had taken her maid 2 hours to perfect. She looked every inch a duchess. She felt like a fraud wrapped in silk. "Ready?" Julian appeared at her side, devastating in formal black, his eyes unreadable. They hadn't spoken since last night. Iris had taken breakfast in her room, claiming a headache. She'd avoided the library, the morning room, anywhere he might be. Now faced with hours of forced proximity, she felt her carefully constructed defenses cracking. "As ready as I'll ever be." She took his offered arm, feeling the warmth of him through layers of fabric. "Julian, about last night. We'll discuss it later, after." His jaw was tight. "For now, we play the part." The part. Right. That's all this was. They descended the stairs together as the first guests began to arrive. The receiving line stretched for an hour. Lord after lady after social climber, all of them watching Iris with varying degrees of curiosity, judgment, or barely concealed hostility. Lady Thornbury arrived precisely on time, her expression sour as week-old milk. "Your Grace," she said to Julian, her curtsy shallow. Then, to Iris, "Duchess." The title was acknowledgement, but barely. "Lady Thornbury." Iris smiled with all the warmth she could manufacture. "How kind of you to attend. One does not refuse the Duke of Greymont's personal invitation." The barb landed delicately, though I confess surprise at such a grand event. "One might think you were attempting to prove something." "One might think," Julian said coolly, "that I simply wish to celebrate my wife with the grandeur she deserves. How fortunate that you could be here to witness it." Lady Thornbury's eyes narrowed, but she moved on. The receiving line continued. Iris's face ached from smiling. Her feet hurt from standing, but slowly, imperceptibly, the tide began to turn. Lords she'd met briefly at other events stopped to converse rather than simply acknowledge her. Ladies complimented her gown, her jewelry, her excellent taste in the ballroom's decorations. The weight of Julian's public support was working. It became socially dangerous to snub the Duchess when the Duke made his preference so clear. And then Vivian Lockhart arrived. She swept into the ballroom like a duchess herself, all cold beauty and calculated grace. Her gown was crimson, deliberately provocative, deliberately attention-grabbing. She curtsied to Julian with exaggerated depth, then turned to Iris with a smile sharp as a blade. "Duchess, what a lovely event. Though I confess, I'm surprised to see such extravagance when your marriage is so temporary." The word dropped like poison. Around them, conversations stuttered. Heads turned. The very air seemed to still. "I beg your pardon." Iris's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Oh, forgive me." Vivian's eyes glittered with malice. "Did you think it was a secret, the 7-month arrangement, the contract marriage designed to satisfy the late Duke's will?" She pulled a folded paper from her reticule. "I have a copy right here, courtesy of a very helpful clerk in your solicitor's office. It makes for fascinating reading." The room exploded in whispers. Julian went rigid beside Iris, his hand tightening painfully on her arm. "Where did you get that?" "Does it matter?" Vivian's smile widened. "What matters is that London now knows the truth. Your marriage is a fraud, a business arrangement. You married a shopgirl for 7 months to claim an inheritance, then planned to discard her like yesterday's news." She turned to the crowd, her voice carrying. "I wonder how the late Duke would feel about his nephew making a mockery of his final wishes." The silence that followed was deafening. Iris felt every eye in the ballroom fix on her, felt judgment crash over her like a wave, felt the careful facade they'd built begin to crumble. "This is slander," Julian said, his voice deadly quiet. "It's truth." Vivian held up the contract. "Signed, sealed and legally binding. 7 months, £4,000 upon completion, separate bedchambers. Annulment filed immediately upon conclusion." She looked directly at Iris. "Tell me, Duchess, did you actually believe this would last?" The blood drained from Iris's face. Around them the whispers grew to a roar. She heard snatches of conversation. Fraud, deception. unsuitable after all, and felt the world tilting beneath her feet. Then, Julian moved. He stepped forward, placing himself between Iris and Vivian, and when he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the ballroom. "You are correct, Lady Vivian. My marriage to Iris began as a contract." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Iris's heart stopped. "My uncle's will required marriage. I needed a wife. Mrs. Thornwell needed security for herself and her sister. We entered into an agreement that was meant to last precisely 7 months before dissolving into annulment." Julian paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "That contract exists. Every word Lady Vivian quoted is accurate." The whispers grew vicious. Iris wanted to run, to flee, to disappear, but Julian's hand found hers squeezed once, hard, and held on. "What Lady Vivian's document does not show," Julian continued, his voice cutting through the chaos, "is what happened after the contract was signed. It does not show the woman I discovered over breakfasts and library conversations. It does not show her intelligence, her grace under impossible pressure, her refusal to be diminished by those who believe birth matters more than character." His grip tightened on Iris's hand. "The contract brought Iris into my life, but it is not what kept her there." The room had gone silent again, but this time the quality was different, listening, waiting. "I married Iris Thornwell because I needed to satisfy a legal requirement," Julian said. "I stayed married to her because I fell in love with her." The words detonated through the ballroom. Iris's breath caught in her throat. He was doing this, saying this, in front of everyone, knowing it would change everything. "The contract specified 7 months, Julian continued. 4 of those months have passed. We have 12 weeks remaining before the annulment was scheduled to be filed. I am here tonight to inform you and my wife, if she'll permit it, that I have instructed my solicitor to destroy those papers. There will be no annulment, no separation, no dissolution." He turned to face Iris fully, and the raw emotion in his eyes made her knees weak. "If she'll have me, Iris Thornwell will remain the Duchess of Greymont, not for 7 months, but for the rest of our lives." The ballroom erupted in shock, but Iris heard none of it. She stared at Julian, this man who was supposed to be temporary, who was supposed to let her go, who was now offering her everything she had convinced herself she couldn't have. "You're destroying the contract," she whispered. "I destroyed it 3 days ago." He reached into his jacket, pulled out a handful of ash. "This is what remains of our arrangement. What I'm proposing now is not a contract. It's a choice." "Julian, you can't... The inheritance... If we're not married for 7 months..." The will specified marriage and duration. It did not specify that the marriage must end afterward. A small smile tugged at his mouth. "My solicitor confirmed it. If we remain married, the inheritance is secure. More importantly, we are secure. But I'm nobody. You are the woman I love." He said it simply, as though it were the most obvious truth in the world. "And if London cannot accept that, then London can go to hell." Scattered gasps and 1 or 2 nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. Vivian's face had gone white with fury. This proves nothing. The marriage still began as fraud." "Careful, Lady Vivian." Julian's voice dropped to something dangerous. "You obtained that contract through bribery and theft. My solicitor's clerk has confessed to selling it to you for £50. That is a criminal act. If you continue to spread slander about my wife, I will prosecute. And unlike your aunt, I do not make idle threats." Vivian's composure cracked. "You wouldn't dare... Try me." Julian turned back to Iris, dismissing Vivian entirely. "I'm sorry for not saying this sooner. For letting you believe we were counting down to an ending when I've been desperately searching for a way to make this permanent. I should have told you in the library last night. I should have told you 100 times over these past weeks. I was afraid..." His voice broke slightly. "I was afraid you would refuse, that you would choose the contract and the exit it promised over the risk of something real." Iris's vision blurred with tears. "You idiot. I was terrified for the same reason." "So you..." Hope flared in Julian's eyes. "Iris, are you saying..." "I'm saying I fell in love with you somewhere between breakfast coffee and late-night library visits. I'm saying I've been counting down to the 7-month mark, not because I wanted to leave, but because I didn't think I could stay. I'm saying..." She took his face in her hands, not caring about the audience, not caring about propriety. "I'm saying yes, to permanence, to choice, to you. Julian kissed her. It was not a polite kiss. Not a chaste Duchess and Duke kiss for public consumption. It was desperate and honest, and 4 months of restraint finally breaking free. The ballroom erupted in shocked exclamations, but neither of them cared. When they finally broke apart, Julian rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said, just for her. "Not as part of an arrangement, not as fulfillment of a contract. I love you because you are brave and honest, and you see through every defense I've ever built. I love you because you defend me," Iris whispered back. "Because you make me feel chosen. Because you looked at a desperate widow and saw a duchess. I saw my future." He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "If you'll have me, for longer than 7 months, for forever, then yes." The applause started slowly. 1 person, then 2, then a wave of it washing through the ballroom. Not everyone joined in. Lady Thornbury stood frozen in disapproval. Vivian had already fled, her humiliation complete. But enough people clapped, enough smiled, enough to mark this moment as the turning point it was. Lord Ashworth, of all people, stepped forward with a broad grin. "Well, Greymont, I always said you needed a good woman to shake you out of that frozen perfection. Seems you found her." He bowed to Iris. "Your Grace, my congratulations, and my apologies for my earlier incivility. It seems I misjudged you." "It seems you did, my lord." Iris smiled, feeling lighter than air. "I'm inclined to forgive you, provided you never make that mistake again." "Wouldn't dream of it." He clapped Julian on the shoulder. "A love match, who would have thought it? The confirmed bachelor brought down by a contracted duchess. There's poetry in that." Julian's arm came around Iris's waist, possessive and proud. "The only poetry I care about is having a lifetime to discover what else my wife can teach me about being human." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations, curious questions, and a few cold shoulders from those who remained convinced that birth mattered more than love. But mostly, there was warmth, acceptance, the sense that London society, for all its faults, occasionally recognized genuine emotion when confronted with it. Violet arrived near midnight, her face radiant. "Iris, I just heard. Is it true? Are you truly staying?" Iris embraced her sister, tears streaming freely now. "It's true. No annulment, no separation. Julian and we're making this real." "Oh, thank God." Violet pulled back, her own eyes wet. "I've been so worried, and when Lady Vivian's rumors started spreading, I thought everything would fall apart. But you're happy? Truly? Happier than I ever imagined possible. Good." Violet smiled through her tears. "You deserve this. After everything, after Thomas, after Father's debts, after all those months of barely surviving, you deserve to be chosen." "You deserve to be chosen." The words resonated through Iris's chest like a bell. Julian found them a few minutes later, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "Your sister looks pleased. She's a romantic." Iris accepted the glass with a smile. She always believed this would become real. "Wiser than both of us, then." He handed Violet the second glass. "Miss Thornwell, I hope you'll forgive me for not asking your permission before declaring myself to your sister in front of 200 witnesses. It was perhaps not the most traditional approach." Violet laughed. "Your Grace, I've been praying you'd come to your senses for weeks. I'm just grateful you did it before the 7 months expired." "I nearly didn't." Julian's gaze found Iris again, and the tenderness there made her breath catch. "I was convinced she would choose the contract, the security, the clean exit. Then you don't know my sister very well." Violet squeezed Iris's hand. "She's never chosen the easy path. Why would she start now?" The ball wound down eventually. Guests departed with promises to call, to spread the word of the Duke's grand romantic gesture, to mark this as the event of the season. By 2 in the morning, the ballroom was empty, save for servants clearing debris and extinguishing candles. Iris stood at the window watching London sleep, feeling the weight of the evening settle over her like a blanket. Behind her, she heard Julian's footsteps. "Come to gloat?" she asked without turning. "Come to make sure you're not regretting your choice." He stopped beside her, not touching, but close enough that she felt his warmth. "It's not too late, Iris. If you want the contract reinstated, if you want the exit we agreed to— Stop. She turned to face him, taking his hands in hers. I chose you, Julian, not the contract, not the security. You, the man who defended me to modistes and matrons, who planned a ball to protect my sister, who looked at a desperate arrangement and found something worth keeping. I found everything worth keeping. His hands tightened on hers. You've transformed this house, Iris, made it a home instead of a museum. You've transformed me, made me someone who believes in more than duty and obligation. We transformed each other. She reached up, touching his face. I walked into this arrangement, thinking I was being practical, choosing survival over sentiment. I never imagined I'd find this. What did you find? Someone who makes me feel like I was worth choosing, like I matter beyond my utility or my desperation. You gave me that, Julian. Before the declaration tonight, before the public kiss. You gave me that in quiet moments and small gestures and the way you look at me over breakfast, as though you're the most fascinating thing in my world. He smiled. Because you are. They stood in the empty ballroom holding each other, and Iris felt the last piece of her careful defenses finally crumble. This was real. This was permanent. This was a man who had chosen her not once, but over and over, in 100 small moments leading up to tonight's grand gesture. Take me to bed, she whispered. Julian's eyes darkened. Iris, not separate chambers tonight, not distance and contract terms. I want— She took a breath. I want my husband, if you'll have me. His kiss was answer enough. Morning arrived with sunlight streaming through Julian's bedroom windows, and Iris wrapped in his arms. She woke slowly, aware of warmth and safety, and the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her ear. Good morning. Julian's voice rumbled through his chest. Sleep well? Better than I have in months. She tilted her head up to look at him. No more counting down. No more watching the calendar and dreading the end. No more pretending this is temporary. He brushed hair from her face, the gesture achingly tender. Though I'll miss some aspects of our arrangement, such as the way you'd glare at me over breakfast when I read the paper instead of talking to you, as though I were committing some unforgivable crime. Iris laughed. You were. We had limited time together. I wasn't going to waste it on silence. We have unlimited time now. Julian kissed her forehead, her nose, her mouth. A lifetime of breakfasts, of library evenings, of moments I once thought I had to ration. What will we do with all that time? Everything. He pulled her closer. We'll finish transforming Greymont House into something warm and alive. We'll host Violet's wedding here. We'll visit Thornfield Manor and decide what to do with it. We'll probably argue about estate management and social obligations and whose turn it is to choose our evening reading. Sounds domestic. Sounds perfect. They lay in comfortable silence for a while, and Iris found herself thinking about the past 4 months, how what had started as desperation had become something infinitely more precious, how a contract meant to end had instead become a beginning. Vivian will try again, she said quietly. To damage us. She won't forgive being humiliated. Let her try. Julian's voice carried absolute conviction. She has no power over us anymore, Iris. The contract is destroyed. Our marriage is real. And I will defend you, defend us against any threat. Even if it costs you? Especially then. He met her eyes, and the certainty there took her breath away. You are not a convenience, not an obligation, not a contracted duchess playing a temporary role. You are my wife, my partner, the woman I choose every day and every moment. Nothing Vivian or Lady Thornbury or anyone else says can change that. The woman I choose. The phrase settled into Iris's bones like truth. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Kendall's voice carried through. Your Grace, the post has arrived. There are several letters requiring immediate attention. Julian sighed. The aftermath begins. They dressed quickly and met in the breakfast room, where a small mountain of correspondence awaited. Some were congratulatory, friends and acquaintances pleased by the love match. Others were pointed in their absence of commentary, the stiff formality making clear that not everyone approved. One letter, however, stood out. Heavy paper, formal seal, unmistakable handwriting. It's from Lady Thornbury, Iris said, her stomach sinking. Julian took it, broke the seal, read quickly. His expression shifted from wariness to surprise to something that looked remarkably like satisfaction. What does it say? He handed her the letter. Read it yourself. Iris scanned the precise script. Your Grace, I write to acknowledge that I may have been precipitous in my judgment of the Duchess of Greymont. Your public declaration last evening has given me cause to reconsider my assessment. A man of your standing does not make such pronouncements lightly. If you see worth in Mrs. Thornwell, in the Duchess, then perhaps I failed to look closely enough. I do not offer apology, as I acted according to my understanding at the time. However, I offer reconsideration. Should the Duchess call upon me at her convenience, I would be pleased to further our acquaintance. I remain, Your Grace, your humble servant. Lady Thornbury. Iris set down the letter, stunned. She's bending. She's recognizing reality. Julian smiled. You stood up to her. I defended you publicly. We demonstrated that our marriage is not a social convenience but a genuine partnership. For someone like Lady Thornbury, that matters. She may be rigid, but she's not stupid. Alienating us serves no purpose now. So we've won. We've survived. He took her hand across the breakfast table. The real victory is this. Us. Morning coffee and correspondence. The ordinary moments that make up a life together. Another knock interrupted them. This time it was a footman bearing a calling card. Miss Violet Thornwell to see you, Your Grace. She says it's urgent. Violet burst into the breakfast room moments later, her face glowing. Iris, Julian, the most wonderful news. Mr. Hartley's mother just called. She wants to move forward with the wedding. She said... Violet paused, suddenly tearful. She said that any family the Duke of Greymont supports so publicly is a family she's honored to join. Iris embraced her sister, her own tears flowing freely. Oh, Vi, I'm so glad. This is because of you, both of you. Violet pulled back, looking between them. You fought for me. You risked everything to protect my future. I'll never forget that. Your family, Julian said simply. We protect family. The word landed with weight. Family, not obligation, not contract. The real, messy, precious thing. After Violet left, effusive with gratitude and wedding plans, Iris returned to the breakfast room to find Julian standing by the window, looking out at the London morning. Thinking about what comes next, she asked. Thinking about how close we came to losing this. He turned to her, expression serious. If Vivian had revealed the contract a week earlier, if I hadn't already destroyed the annulment papers, we might have been forced to separate anyway, to prove the marriage was real by ending it and starting over. But we didn't lose it. No. He crossed to her, taking her hands. We gambled everything on honesty, on choosing each other publicly. And we won. Together. Always together. He pulled her close, and Iris rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. I have a question. Ask it. The contract specified that you would receive £4,000 upon completion of the 7 months. Since we're not completing those terms, since we're staying married, what do you want to do with those funds? Iris pulled back, considering. I want to use them to help others, women in situations like mine, widows with debts, women fleeing bad situations, anyone who needs a way out. We could establish a fund. A way for desperate people to find security, without having to make impossible choices. Julian's expression softened. That's brilliant. It's practical. If we can help even one person avoid the fear I felt, the desperation, then the money will be well spent. Then we'll establish the fund together. He kissed her forehead. The Thornwell Foundation, named for the woman who taught me that strength doesn't require armor. Julian, you did, you know. Teach me that. I spent years believing that emotion was weakness, that caring made you vulnerable. Then you walked into my life with your impossible honesty and refusal to hide, and you showed me that vulnerability is its own form of courage. Iris's throat tightened. I was terrified every day. I know. That's what made it courageous. He cupped her face gently. You were terrified, and you did it anyway. You stood up to Lady Thornbury. You confronted your fears. You chose to risk your heart even when the contract promised an exit. That's not weakness, Iris. That's extraordinary strength. I chose you because you made me feel worth choosing." She smiled through tears. "That's the gift you gave me, Julian. Not the money or the security or even the protection. You made me believe I deserved more than survival. You made me believe I deserved to be chosen. You deserve everything." His voice was fierce. "And I intend to spend the rest of my life proving it to you." They stood in the breakfast room, wrapped in each other, and Iris felt the last ghost of her old life finally release its grip. She was no longer the desperate widow measuring her worth in pounds and contracts. She was no longer the woman counting down to an ending. She was the Duchess of Graymont, chosen, defended, loved, and she had chosen in return. 6 weeks later, Violet's wedding took place in the gardens of Graymont House under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Iris stood beside Julian, watching her sister marry the man she loved, and felt profound gratitude for the strange path that had led here. The contract had brought her to this house, but it was love, messy, complicated, absolutely uncontracted love, that had made her stay. After the ceremony, as guests mingled and champagne flowed, Lady Thornbury approached Iris with something that might have been approval. "Duchess, a lovely wedding. Your sister is fortunate to have your support. Family takes care of family, Lady Thornbury." Iris smiled. "As you yourself have said." "Indeed." The older woman's gaze sharpened. "I understand you're establishing some sort of charitable fund for women in difficult circumstances. The Thornwell Foundation, yes. We are finalizing the details now. I'd like to contribute." Lady Thornbury said it stiffly as though the words cost her. "My late husband left me more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. If some of it can prevent desperation, can give women choices, then it should be used accordingly." Iris stared at her. "That's very generous." "It's practical." Lady Thornbury softened fractionally. "You were right, you know. When you came to tea. Character endures where breeding fades. I didn't want to see it at the time, but your marriage to Graymont has proven the point rather decisively. Thank you, Lady Thornbury. Your support means a great deal. Don't make me regret it." But the older woman's tone held warmth. "Now, I should congratulate the bride, family after all." She swept away, leaving Iris slightly stunned. Julian appeared at her elbow, champagne in hand. "Did Lady Thornbury just offer to fund your charity?" "I think she did. Miracles do happen." He handed her the glass, then raised his own. "To family, to second chances, to arranged marriages that became real, to choosing each other," Iris added. "Every day, in every moment." They clinked glasses and drank, and across the garden, Violet laughed at something Mr. Hartley said, her face radiant with joy. "She deserves this," Iris said quietly. "All the happiness she can hold." "So do you." Julian's arm came around her waist. "And I intend to ensure you receive it. I already have." She leaned into him, feeling perfectly at home in his embrace. "I have you, I have family, I have purpose, I have everything that matters. No regrets about the contract ending." "Not one." She smiled up at him. "The contract gave me security for 7 months. You gave me a lifetime. Then I'd say we both made excellent bargains." They stood in the garden, surrounded by celebration, and Iris thought about the woman she'd been 4 months ago, desperate, afraid, convinced she was trading one form of survival for another. That woman had signed a contract promising 7 months and an ending. This woman, the one standing in sunlight with her husband's arm around her, had discovered that the best endings were really beginnings in disguise. The contract had promised temporary safety. Love had given her permanent home. And in the end, that was the only term that mattered. 3 months after Violet's wedding, Iris stood in the Thornfield Manor library, overseeing its transformation into a refuge. The estate Julian had inherited was being converted into the headquarters of the Thornwell Foundation, a place where women in crisis could find shelter, support, and pathways to independence. "The rooms upstairs are ready," Mrs. Kendall reported, having transferred her considerable organizational skills to the project. "We can house 20 women comfortably, more if needed." "Excellent." Iris marked it off her list. "And the legal services? Do we have solicitors willing to donate time?" 3 firms have committed to providing assistance, including Mr. Pemberton. Iris looked up in surprise. Julian's solicitor. He said, Mrs. Kendall consulted her notes. He said that any contract that resulted in the Duke of Greymont finding love deserved to be celebrated. He wants to help other women find their own versions of security. Warmth bloomed in Iris's chest. That's wonderful. Thank you, Mrs. Kendall. After the housekeeper left, Iris walked through the transformed manor, seeing not the grand estate it had been, but the haven it was becoming. Women would come here desperate and afraid, just as she had been. They would find shelter and support. And perhaps, like her, they would discover that survival could be the first step toward something more. Julian found her in the garden, where she was examining plans for a vegetable garden. Penny, for your thoughts? I was thinking about choices. Iris set down the plans and turned to him. How many women don't have them? How desperation forces impossible decisions. How a simple contract gave me options when I had none. And now you're giving those options to others. He pulled her close, pride evident in every line of his face. You've created something remarkable, Iris. This foundation will help hundreds of women. We created it together. No. He shook his head. I provided funds and connections. You provided the vision, the understanding of what desperate women need, because you were one of them. This is your achievement. She smiled, leaning into his warmth. I couldn't have done it without you, without us, without learning that being chosen matters just as much as survival. You were always worth choosing. His arms tightened around her. I'm just grateful I was smart enough to see it. They stood in the garden, and Iris felt the completeness of it, the journey from contract to connection, from desperation to devotion, from temporary arrangement to permanent partnership. Do you ever miss it? Julian asked quietly. The simplicity of the contract, knowing exactly where we stood. Not for a moment. She pulled back to meet his eyes. The contract was safe, defined, but it was also empty. This us is messy and complicated and infinitely better, even when I'm insufferable, especially then. She kissed him, soft and lingering, because even your insufferable moments are mine, forever. That's what we chose. Forever, Julian echoed. I liked the sound of that. As they walked back toward the manor, Iris reflected on the impossible journey that had brought them here. A contract designed to end in 7 months. A marriage that was supposed to be temporary. 2 people who had agreed to play parts and instead found themselves living a truth neither had anticipated. She had walked into Julian's study, believing she was choosing survival. She had walked out, discovering she was worth choosing. And that, in the end, was the only contract that mattered, the one written not in legal terms but in daily choices, in morning conversations, in the simple act of looking at someone and deciding over and over that they were worth keeping. The 7 months had come and gone. The contract was ash, but what remained was infinitely more valuable than any agreement could promise. It was love. Real, complicated, absolutely uncontracted love. And it was theirs. If you felt Iris and Julian's journey, if their story of choosing each other spoke to something in your heart, I'd be so grateful if you'd leave a like and let me know what moment resonated most with you in the comments. Your connection to these stories means everything. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss when 2 people find each other against impossible odds. There's another story waiting for you right now. Tap to watch next. Thank you for being here. You're the reason these stories exist, to remind us all that we're worth choosing every single day.